Once there were men like Dengyo, Gishin, Jikaku, and Chisho who journeyed 10,000 miles across the waves to China to acquire the sacred teachings, and there visited the mountains and rivers to pay reverence to Buddhist statues and carry them back. In some cases, they built holy temples on the peaks of high mountains in which to preserve those scriptures and statues. In other cases, they constructed sacred halls in the bottoms of deep valleys, where such objects could be worshipped and honored. As a result, the Buddhas Shakyamuni and Medicine Master shone side by side, casting their influence upon present and future ages, while the Bodhisattva's space treasury and earth repository brought benefit to the living and the dead. The rulers of the nation contributed districts or villages so that the lamps might continue to burn bright before the images, while the stewards of the great estate gave their fields and gardens as an offering. But because of this book by Honen, this Nambusu chosen above all, the Lord of Teachings, Shakyamuni is forgotten, and all honor is paid to Amida, the Buddha of the Western land. The transmission of the law from Shakyamuni Buddha is ignored, and Medicine Master, the Tuscum one of the Eastern region, is neglected. Attention is paid only to the 3 Pure Land Sutras in 4 volumes, and all the other wonderful scriptures that Shakyamuni expounded throughout the 5 periods of his preaching life are cast aside. If temples are not dedicated to Amida, then people no longer have any desire to support them or pay honor to the Buddhas enshrined there. If priests are not practitioners of the Nembutsu, then people quickly forget all about giving those priests alms. As a result, the halls of the Buddha have fallen into ruin, scarcely a wisp of smoke rising above their moss-covered roof tiles, and the priest quarters have become empty and dilapidated, the dew deep on the grasses in their courtyards. And in spite of such conditions, no one gives a thought to protecting the law or to restoring the temples. Hence, the sage priests who once presided over the temples leave and do not return, and the benevolent deities who guarded the nation depart and no longer appear. This has all come about because of this Nembutsu chosen above all by Honen. How pitiful to think that in the space of a few decades, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people have been deluded by these devilish teachings, and in so many cases confused as to the true teachings of Buddhism. If people favor what is only incidental and forget what is primary, can the benevolent deities be anything but angry? If people cast aside what is perfect and take up what is biased, can the world escape the plots of demons? Rather than offering up 10,000 prayers for remedy, it will be better simply to outlaw this one evil. This time the guest was truly enraged and said, "In the ages since our original teacher, the Buddha Shakyamuni, preached the 3 Pure Land Sutras, the Dharma teacher Tanluan had originally studied the 4 treatises, but abandoned them and put all his faith in the Pure Land teachings. Similarly, the meditation master Tao Cho'o ceased to spread the varied practices of the Nirvana Sutra and devoted all his attention to propagating the practice that leads one to the Western Pure Land. The Reverend Shantao discarded the sundry practices and established the single practice of the Nembutsu, and the supervisor of priest Ashin collected essential passages from various sutras to form his work, making the single practice of the Nembutsu the essence of his teaching. Such was the manner in which this man honored and respected the Buddha Amida, and uncountable numbers of people, as a result, were able to gain rebirth in the Pure Land. Of particular note was the sage Honen, who as a child entered the monastery on Mount He. By the time he was 17, he had worked his way through all 60 volumes of Tendai literature and had investigated all the 8 schools and mastered their essentials. In addition, he had read through the entire body of sutras and treatises 7 times and exhausted all the works of exegesis and biography. His wisdom shone like the sun and moon, and his virtue exceeded that of the earlier teachers. In spite of all this, he was in doubt as to the proper path to emancipation and could not make out the true meaning of nirvana. Therefore, he read and examined all the texts he could, pondered deeply and considered every possibility, and in the end put aside all the sutras and concentrated on the single practice of the Nembutsu. In addition, he received confirmation of his decision when Shantao miraculously appeared to him in a dream, and he proceeded to spread his doctrines among friends and strangers in all 4 corners of the land. Thereafter, he was hailed as a reincarnation of Bodhisattva great power, or was revered as Shantao reborn. In every quarter, people of eminent and lowly birth alike bowed their heads in respect, and men and women from all over Japan sought him. Since that time, the springs and autumns have succeeded each other, and the years have piled upon years, and yet you insist upon putting aside the venerable teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha contained in the Pure Land Sutras and willfully speak evil of the passage describing the oath of the Buddha Amida. Why do you try to blame the sacred age of Honen for the disasters of recent years, going out of your way to slander the former teachers of Pure Land doctrines and to heap abuse of the sage Honen? You are, as the saying goes, deliberately blowing back the fur and hunting for flaws in the leather, deliberately piercing the skin in hopes of drawing blood. From ancient times to the present, the world has never seen such a speaker of evil. You had better learn a little caution and restraint. When you pile up such grave offences, how can you hope to escape punishment? I am afraid even to sit here in your company. I must take up my staff and be on my way. The host, smiling, restrained his guest and said, Insects that live on smart wheat forget how bitter it tastes. Those who stay long in privies forget how foul the smell is. Here you listen to my good words and think them wicked. Point to a slanderer of the law and call him a sage. Mistrust a correct teacher and take him for an evil priest. Your confusion is great indeed, and your offense anything but light. Listen to my explanation of how this confusion arose, and let us discuss the matter in detail. Shakyamuni Buddha expounded the 5 periods of doctrines, established the order in which they were preached, and divided them into the provisional and the true teachings. But Tanluan, Tao Cho'o, and Shantao embraced the provisional teachings and forgot about the true ones, went by what had been taught in the earlier period of the Buddha's life, and discarded what was taught later. They were not the kind of men who delved into the deep places of Buddhist doctrine. Honen in particular, though he followed the practices advocated by these earlier men, was ignorant as to their source. How do we know this? Because he lumped together all the 637 Mahayana scriptures in 2,883 volumes, and along with them all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and the deities of this world, and urged people to discard, close, ignore, and abandon them, with these 4 injunctions corrupting the hearts of all people. Thus he poured out perverted words of his own invention, and took absolutely no cognizance of the explanations put forth in the Buddhist scriptures. His is the worst kind of baseless talk, a clear case of defamation. There are no words to describe it, no way to censure it that is not too mild. And yet people all put faith in this baseless talk of his, and without exception pay honor to his Nembutsu chosen above all. As a consequence, they revere the 3 sutras of the Pure Land and cast all the other sutras aside. They look up to one Buddha alone, Amida, of the land of perfect bliss, and forget about the other Buddhas. A man such as Honen is in truth the arch-enemy of the Buddhas and the scriptures, and the foe of sage priests and ordinary men and women alike. And now his distorted teachings have spread throughout the 8 regions of the country, permeating the 10 directions. You became quite horrified when I blamed an earlier period for the disasters that have occurred in recent years. Perhaps I should cite a few examples from the past to show you that you are mistaken in your feelings. The second volume of Great Concentration and Insight quotes a passage from Records of the Historian that says, quote, "In the closing years of the Zhou dynasty, there were persons who let their hair hang down, went about naked to the waist, and did not observe the rites and regulation." Unquote. The annotations on Great Concentration and Insight in the second volume explains this passage by quoting from Sou's commentary on Spring and Autumn Annals as follows, quote, "When King Pe'ing of the Zhou first moved his capital to the east, he saw men by the Yi River who let their hair hang down and performed sacrifices in the fields. Someone who had great understanding said, 'In less than 100 years the dynasty will fall, for the rites are already neglected.' From this it is evident that the portent appears first, and later the disaster itself comes about." The Great Concentration and Insight passage goes on to say, "Zhuangqi was a man of extraordinary talent, but he let his hair grow like a mass of brambles and left his belt undone. Later, the sons of the aristocracy all imitated him, until those who behaved in a churlish and insulting manner were thought to be acting quite naturally, and those who were restrained and proper in their behavior were ridiculed as mere peasants. This was a sign that the Suma family, the rulers of the Western Qin dynasty, will meet with their downfall." Similarly, the record of a pilgrimage to China in search of the law by the great teacher Jikaku states that in the first year of the Hu Zheang era, 841, Emperor Wusong of the Tang dynasty commanded the priest Qingshuang or Changqing temple to transmit the Nembutsu teaching of the Buddha Amida in the various temples. Qingshuang spent 3 days in each temple, going about from one temple to another without ever ceasing. In the second year of the same era, soldiers from the land of the Uyghurs invaded the borders of the Tang Empire. In the third year of the same era, the regional commander in the area north of the Yellow River suddenly raised a revolt. Later, the Kingdom of Tibet once more refused to obey orders from China, and the Uyghurs repeatedly seized Chinese territory. On the whole, the conflicts and uprisings were like those that prevailed at the time when the Qin dynasty and the military leader Xiang Yi were overthrown, and the towns and villages were devastated by fire and other disasters. What was even worse, Emperor Wusong carried out a vast campaign to wipe out Buddhist teachings and destroyed a great many temples and pagodas. He was never able to put down the uprisings and died in agony shortly after. This is the essence of Jikaku's original passage. In view of these events, we should consider the fact that Honen belonged to the time of the retired Emperor Go-Toba, around the Kennin era, 1201 to 1204. And what happened to the retired emperor is evident before our very eyes. Thus, Tang China provided an earlier example of the fall of an emperor, and our own country offers similar proof. You should neither doubt this nor consider it strange. The only thing to do now is to abandon the evil ways and take up those that are good, to cut off this affliction at the source, to cut it off at the root. The guest, looking somewhat mollified, said, "Though I have not yet probed deeply into the matter, I believe I understand to some degree what you are saying. Nevertheless, throughout the area from Kyoto, the capital, to Kamakura, the headquarters of the Shōgun, there are numerous eminent Buddhist leaders and key figures in the clergy. And yet none of them has so far appealed to the Shōgun concerning this affair, or submitted a memorial to the throne. You, on the other hand, a person of humble position, think nothing of spewing out offensive accusation. Your assertion goes too far, and your behavior is unreasonable." The host said, "Though I may be a person of little ability, I have reverently given myself to the study of the Mahayana. A blue fly, if it clings to the tail of a thoroughbred horse, can travel 10,000 miles, and the green ivy that twines around the tall pine can grow to 1,000 feet. I was born as the son of the one Buddha, Shakyamuni, and I served the king of scriptures, the Lotus Sutra. How could I observe the decline of the Buddhist law and not be filled with emotions of pity and distress? Moreover, the Nirvana Sutra states, if even a good monk sees someone destroying the teaching and disregards him, failing to reproach him, to oust him, or to punish him for his offense, then you should realize that that monk is betraying the Buddha's teaching. But if he outs the destroyer of the law, reproaches him, or punishes him, then he is my disciple and a true voice-hearer. Although I may not be a good monk, I certainly do not want to be accused of betraying the Buddha's teaching. Therefore, in order to avoid such charges, I have cited a few general principles and given a rough explanation of the matter. Earlier in the Gennin era, 1224 to 1225, petitions to the throne were submitted time and again by the two temples of Enryoku-ji and Kofuku-ji. And as a result, an imperial command and a letter of instruction from the shogunate were handed down, ordering that the wood blocks used in printing Honen's Nembusu chosen above all be confiscated and brought to the great lecture hall of Enryoku-ji. There, they were burned in order to repay the debt owed to the Buddhas of the three existences. In addition, orders were given that the menials of Kanjin Inn Shrine should dig up and destroy Honen's grave. Then Honen's disciples, Ryokan, Shoku, Jokaku, Sasho, and others were condemned by the imperial court to exile in distant regions and were never pardoned. In view of these facts, how can you say that no one has submitted a complaint to the authorities concerning these matters?